Want exclusive content and a say on Emerging Cricket's direction? Support us on Patreon. From as little as $2 a month, you'll be helping us grow the game outside its traditional centres. To sign up, log on to Patreon. That's patreon.com/emergingcricket. Today, we chat to Kevin O'Brien, 10 years on from that night in Bangalore. Welcome again to another Emerging Cricket podcast across the usual listening spots and on Sport FM in Perth. I'm Daniel Beswick and I'll be joined in a matter of moments by Tim Culler and Nick Skinner as always as we chat to our guest in part one of a two-part special over the next 2 weeks. For fans of Emerging Cricket, Kevin O'Brien needs a little introduction. On the week of the 10th anniversary of his heroic and match-winning 100 against England, we sat down to discuss his career, the state of the emerging game, and of course, that night in Bangalore and everything that came with it. Enjoy.
I'm Claire Polosek and you're listening to the Emerging Cricket Podcast.
Well, over the last 2 years, we've been privileged to chat to some big names in the emerging game, and this week we chat to yet another colossal figure. Boys, the usual welcome. With over 300 international appearances, our guest this week has played a starring role in moving Ireland's cricket from associate cricket to full membership. Among a host of records, our guest was the 14th man to score a century in all three formats of international cricket, and we speak to him 10 years to the week of his incredible World Cup century against England in Bangalore, which is still the fastest century at a men's World Cup. Kevin O'Brien, what a privilege it is to have you on the show.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
First port of call is the location you are in at the moment. It looks like you've just pulled up for training in your car. Is that the same car that you managed to hit not so long ago?
Yeah, you're right. I have just pulled up to the coldest indoor hall in the world. There's no heating inside. Hence why I'm wearing a hoodie and my jacket. But yeah, it's the same windscreen. That's the one there. It got replaced during the summer. Apparently now it's the most searched for photo of me in the world on Google. So yeah.
Well, and it got Andrew Leonard to be famous again, or more famous already. So it kept him happy.
Did you keep the ball? That's what I want to know.
No, I think the umpires wanted it back and we used it the next over, I think.
Fair enough. All got to keep within the regimented laws of the game. So you are back at training. We know that you guys have just come back from ODI Super League action, but you also had a tour to Zimbabwe called off. So you guys are training at the moment. What's the general feel in the group at the moment in the national setup?
Yeah, so we got back a couple of weeks ago, and then we had obviously a week's quarantine in our houses and had to return 2 negative tests before we were allowed back into kind of high performance center. So thankfully both tests came back negative for me and I've been back now a few weeks. So there's only 4 of us here at the moment: myself, Bally, Andrew Balbirnie, Simi Singh and Barry McCarthy. Most of the other guys, if not all of them, are over at the Wolves team. The Ireland A team are playing a series against Bangladesh. 4-day game, and I think 5 50 overs and 2 T20s. So we're a bit depleted here. There's just 4 players to work with. Yeah, so we've been here for the last couple of weeks. But yeah, as you said, the Zimbabwe series was cancelled. I don't know whether it was due to COVID or due to logistical/financial reasons. Maybe a bit of both. Yeah, so it's disappointing. Nothing really to look forward to now until our season kicks off here in early June against Holland. So it's a long wait, but what can you do?
So I'm guessing that when you hear that news from your own board and they're trying to work out things with Zimbabwe and other boards around the world and trying to piece together the puzzle, I'm assuming it's very difficult for them first and foremost, but then you get that news sort of secondary and it becomes even trickier for you guys trying to work. And as you said, with 4 players, I suppose you've got a decent net session between the 4 of you. What will you guys be doing as that group of 4?
Yeah, well, under the current regulations and level 5 lockdown regs, we're only allowed to train one-on-one with a coach. So our coaches are obviously in, for a couple of hours a day, and we just come in and on our own and train one-to-one. So it's a little bit restricted what you can do, but I suppose it's like most pre-seasons, whether it be in a county or elsewhere around the world. We're obviously stuck indoors due to the weather and stuff. So there's not really much you can do. Work on your game, technique stuff against the machine, or against the Merlin sling machine, or if you want to face a bowler, the bowler's only going to be bowling off maybe 5 or 6 yard run up. So yeah, it's a little bit restricted, but you just got to get the head down and work on 1 or 2 aspects that you need to improve on. I've been doing it now for 17 years or so I kind of know what I need to do in prep for the season. So yeah, it's nothing new to me.
At this point, being a professional cricketer for this long, you said 17 years, how many, bits of your game are left to iron out? I would imagine by this point in your career, you'd know your game inside out, and you would be pretty sure about what you're doing.
Yeah, you would think that, wouldn't you?
Cricket's funny like that. It never lets you stay on top too long.
Exactly. But no, it's interesting because, I mean, before Christmas, I actually changed a couple of things technically in my stance and setup and stuff with regards to batting. And then went on tour against Afghanistan, UAE, and obviously got no runs. So it didn't really work out very well. So I've actually kind of stripped it back, and I'm kind of now working on, what I was doing in the summer, for example, going back to, how I played, 6 or 7 months ago. So I think as a cricketer, you kind of always need to tinker with little things here and there. But ultimately, the majority part of my game, and certainly with batting, is pretty much the same as it was, 10 or 12 or 15 years ago. So it's just kind of tweaking little things here and there. It might be if, head position is slightly different to where it was, or your hands might be slightly different to where they were. But ultimately, yeah, it's the major blocks are fairly similar to what they were all those years ago.
Have there been any particular changes seeing at the top of the order on the 2 white ball formats now? I think when we saw that change, was that the Oman tour that you started opening before the qualifiers back in 2019?
Yes, 2019, yeah.
Yeah, how much of the change has been precipitated by that, with you now being at the top of the order rather than coming in a bit later? Because I think it was a great move. I think we were all calling for that at the time.
Yeah, well, I was calling for it as well for a few years before that. So, yeah, no, I think obviously going up to the top in T20, having some success alongside Sterlo probably did started the chats with 40, of potentially going up to top in 50 over cricket. I suppose the one thing that I've maybe mistakenly thought is, I've got to change my game completely to bat at the top of the order in an ODI as opposed to T20. Whereas ultimately, certainly on reflection from the UAE tour and the Afghanistan series, I've just got to pretty much play the same way as I would do in a 2020 game. Although not go gung-ho from quite as early as you would in a T20, but certainly, still have that positive approach and look to take the game to the bowlers in 50 over cricket. So yeah, that's probably the main thing I've reflected on after the Afghanistan series.
So I guess looking back more towards the start of your career, your father played for Ireland, and you grew up in a time where playing cricket for Ireland was quite unusual, you might say. How did having that family connection influence you into getting into the game, and that family aspect of Irish cricket? We've seen lots of parents and siblings who've played a big part. Obviously, the O'Briens, the Joyces, that rolls off the tongue. So, how did that family aspect influence both you and Irish cricket a bit more generally?
Yeah, I think, obviously cricket here, it's still a minority sport. So, and it is played by a lot of families, and a lot of the strong clubs here in Dublin especially would be made up, of, there'd be a strong link with 3 or 4 different families who would be famous, in inverted commas, around the club scene. And my own club, Railway Union, was one of those. We've got our family, another family, the Whelan family, which their son Roger played for Ireland back in 2007. We've got the Carroll family, which is obviously very famous. Kenny Carroll played cricket and hockey for Ireland. So yeah, the clubs are there's a real family feel around cricket clubs here in Ireland. So it does play a huge bearing on the club. And obviously with Dad playing cricket and growing up watching him play, and Dad was pretty much a legend around the club scene here. And he's scored over 20,000 runs in club cricket. Obviously played for Ireland as well. So having him to look up to was pretty cool. And watching him play, I didn't see him play that much. I was a little bit too young, but my older brothers obviously played with Dad, and Niler got to play with him in senior cricket. So that was pretty cool. And obviously seeing them play as well. So I'm the youngest kid of 6, 5 boys and a girl, and we all played cricket in the local club. So yeah, it was just anything. We played all sports. We played football, hockey, cricket, tennis. We played pretty much everything growing up. And obviously cricket was kind of, shortlisted for us, but Dad was really good. Dad never really pushed us into playing cricket. If we wanted to play, he'd certainly support it, but he wasn't driving us, making us go to cricket training every week or whatnot. So I think having that kind of hands-off approach probably did help, certainly with me, being more of a laid back character than Niall, for example, who was constantly down the nets every day of the summer and winter, begging for me to go down and throw him some balls in the nets so he could,
Having got to know him a little bit, I'm about zero surprised at that. That basically completes the picture of him. Come on, let's go. Come on.
Exactly, and it got to a stage where I just literally said, "No, I can't be bothered going down." So he used to ask mum. He used to ask mum to give him throwdowns in the garden. But yeah, no, obviously having dad playing was a big influence.
So when he tells the story on commentary about how he phoned you the night before a particularly large famous innings and just told you to play your natural game, that probably sounds like, is that a true story?
Who, Ginge, dad?
No, that Niall called you saying that, you were on the phone with him the night before the first T20 century and you weren't sure, you weren't hitting it well, and Niall said, just go out there and play your natural game. That's a story he tells on commentary.
Really?
Have we just called him out?
Maybe.
Ah, dear. Yeah. Sorry, Niall. Hopefully he's listening. I want to pick up on you describing cricket as a minority sport. I think to everyone listening to this, we and they know Ireland now as a full member of the ICC and sitting at the top table. So I guess you've been there since before 2007. How much has the game changed in that time? Because if you just describe it, still a minority sport, yet to get to a point where you're deemed worthy by the ICC to have a full vote and to be funded on not a similar scale, but a similar basis to the rest of the full members. Yeah. Talk us through what you've seen, that transformation over that time.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, we're one of the top 12 in terms in the brackets, test nations and that type of thing. But I mean, unfortunately, the realistic thing is cricket here will probably always be a minority sport. You've got the two Gaelic games, which take pretty much 85-90% of the media coverage every day, even if it's out of season. You've obviously got the English Premiership on as well, which seems like 10 or 11 months of the year as well. It never stops. And obviously that's supported well in Ireland, and then you've got the rugby scene. You've got Leinster, one of the best teams in Europe, and the Irish rugby team are probably ranked 4 or 5 in the world at the moment. So, it's going to struggle to compete in a media industry that, gives 15 pages of sport at the best of times, and, 10 of them go to the Gaelic games. And then the rest has to be squeezed into 4 or 5 pages. So that's the bare reality of it. It's unfortunate for us as cricketers. It's unfortunate as cricket lovers in Ireland that unfortunately going to be like that. But things have picked up. Since 2007, since the World Cup win in Pakistan against Pakistan, the coverage has improved. The general public now know that A, we play cricket, and B, that we have a fairly decent side that can compete against the world's best teams, and C, that they know when we're kind of playing. And the Future Tour program is obviously very beneficial for that Cricket Ireland can get the word out. We've got X amount of games over the next 12 or 18 months, and here they are. Whereas certainly before 07 and, probably in between 07 and 11, it was more so, we have a game in 2 weeks' time against, Team X, come and support kind of thing. And everything was a bit rushed. But now it's thankfully been on the FTP program. It's kind of helped a little bit, but still a long way to go.
Well, I certainly remember a couple of years ago I was in Ireland for the I-Cup game and also the washout against the West Indies. But there were ads on bus stops and that sort of thing. So it is picking up in terms of public mind space. But I'm just thinking historically, there was a time not too long before you were born when cricket was boycotted or banned by the Gaelic games. People who played cricket were not allowed to play Gaelic games, and that was feeding into the perception of it being an English sport. And all of the attitude around that sort of thing. How has that sort of cultural attitude changed? I'm thinking about someone like John Mooney, who's a staunch Irish nationalist, being in the national cricket team. I'm just thinking how you go from being a quote unquote garrison game to being a part of the modern Ireland.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because you look, that attitude is taken with cricket, and then you look at football, for example. There's the attitude towards soccer, for example, is completely different. Mm. So yeah, it was a tricky one growing up for sure. Myself growing up in obviously in Sandymount, close to the local club. The 2 schools we went to, the primary school and secondary school that myself and Niall went to, we didn't have a cricket team. And certainly the secondary school, you kept it quiet that you played cricket. And I remember Niall tells a good story. He was selected for the Under-19 World Cup in Sri Lanka in the year 2000, and the principal came on over the intercom across the school and said, congratulations to one of our students who's been selected for the Youth World Cup, Cricket World Cup. Well done, Niall O'Brien. And he says the amount of people turned around to him and they kind of gave him a bit of a stare. But thankfully, now 20 odd years later, both our primary school and secondary school have cricket team, and it's not really frowned upon. It's not frowned upon at all, really. People's attitudes have changed towards cricket. Now they just see it as a sport that Irish people play, which is fine. Whether you're Catholic, Protestant, or you're Pakistani who's now an Irish national or whatever. If you're living here from all over the world, because we've got so many people in Ireland who play the club game who are not born in Ireland. There's South Africans, Australians, people from West Indies, people from all over Asia. So I think people have changed. The perception of cricket has changed, and thankfully, because we all know it's a great game, and the amount of success that we've had as a team, and the amount of people that we've made happy who support us. It's thankfully those attitudes have changed with the general public and the majority of the population in Ireland.
Do you think the multicultural aspect of cricket has been a part of that cultural change?
Yeah, I think so, potentially. A lot of the players playing in the leagues, for example, would be from, South Asia, who've come over here during the Celtic Tiger and whatnot. They've come and studied, and they've stayed on, and they've made Ireland their home. And that's great, And Simi Singh, who's currently in the Irish team, he qualified for Ireland in 2015 or 16. So, he was born in Mohali. He came over as an overseas pro for 4 or 5 years with a club, and then obviously decided to stay. And he's been a great player for the Irish team since he made his debut. So I think we are open to that. And in the past, we've had Aussies, TJ and Alex Cusack, Andre Botha from South Africa. The list goes on. And they've come over and they've made Ireland their home for an amount of time, and they've given back to Irish cricket.
Well, a number of those players featured in that national team that won in 2007 against Pakistan, and again that win against England in 2011. And I know we're coming up to 10 years since that innings in Bangalore, but I do want to talk about the 2007 win first, because you were out in the middle there with Trent Johnston at the end, rolling Pakistan and then getting home. Do you remember what the feel was like in 2007? There was a 16-team tournament, which was great from an associate point of view. It gave you guys an opportunity to perform at the highest level, and you guys went out there. You had that tie against Zimbabwe, and then you went out and beat Pakistan. What was the atmosphere in the Caribbean at the time with you guys as a group?
Yeah, it was absolutely class. I'd made my debut probably 6 months before. I made my debut in June 2006. So I didn't have, and I've said this before, I didn't have much time to kind of get dropped from the squad, which was great. But yeah, to experience the World Cup then was unbelievable. We went over as a squad of 15 players. I think Owen Morgan was our only real professional. I think Niler was in between counties at the time. We had a farmer. Boyd was working on his dad's farm. I was working pulling pints in a nightclub. TJ was a salesman. Kenny Carroll was a postman. So we were just a mismatch of people who, once we played cricket, we were actually quite a good side. And not many teams knew about us beforehand. And I remember we had a tournament in Kenya before we went to the World Cup between ourselves and the other 5 associates of Scotland, Kenya, Canada, Bermuda and Holland. And we lost 4 out of the 5 games in Kenya. We had an absolute stinker. So we kind of went into the tournament as nobody really recognised that we were actually any good. Bar the 15 players and the management, and then obviously the thousands of Irish people who came to support us in Kingston. So yeah, just unbelievable. What an amazing place to play cricket, first of all. As a 22-year-old who was just playing for a bit of crack, really, going out and basically experiencing something that will never be experienced before. The 8 weeks there were unbelievable. Grew a love for rum and coke. And grew a love for Caribbean music, and yeah, it was just unbelievable.
So we have to bring up 4 years later. It's Bangalore. It's March 2, 2011. You guys take on England. I'm sure the bookies would have had you guys well outsiders before that. We know obviously the end of the story, but take us back. Thinking about waking up that day, knowing you're playing England. Did you guys, I suppose similar to 2007, a lot of those guys, you knew a lot about the English team. They might not have known too much about you guys, which almost works to your advantage. Waking up that morning and thinking, we've got England today. What was the game plan, the thoughts, the feelings that the group had before that particular encounter?
Yeah, it was different than the 2007. You kind of feel, because we'd played in the lead up to 2011, we'd played some really good cricket, the last probably 18 months before the World Cup. Simo had, we had a really settled side. Everyone kind of knew their role. Simo had drilled as well, and we were a very, very well disciplined team. Not saying we weren't in 2007, but we were equally. But certainly the feel in the camp was different. We were going into that World Cup in 2011 expecting to qualify for the quarterfinals, and people might hear me say that and raise an eyebrow, but we had a very good team. We had a very good batting lineup. Our top 4 or 5 were all county cricketers, established county cricketers, who'd all played county cricket for years and had been successful. So and we were very confident in our ability. And the big thing was we lost to Bangladesh, I think, about 4 or 5 days beforehand in Dhaka, a game we should have won, chasing 206 or something. We were 140 odd for 4. We were bowled out for 165 or something like that. So we kind of knew the English game was a must-win game if we wanted to qualify for the quarterfinals. And we knew that we had, looking at the fixtures before the tournament started, we knew we had to win one of the first 2. Whether it was, and most likely we were kind of thinking, we have a chance of beating Bangladesh. So obviously throwing that game away, really, we knew we had to win the English game if we wanted to stand any chance of qualifying for the quarterfinals.
So they put up 300 plus. You guys don't get off to the greatest of starts. You come in at, I think it's 4 for 106 after it's the 23rd over or something. You lose a wicket not long after. I'm sure even parts of the Bangalore crowd, as loud as they were probably thinking, this is only going one way. Did you kind of walk out there thinking, well, I've got nothing to lose at this point? Or did you honestly say to yourself, look, I can sort of piece together an innings, and by the time I get to whatever, say the last few overs, and I'm not out still at the end of this, we actually still a very, very good chance of winning this game?
I'd be lying if I said yes to your second half. I mean, we were 111 for 5. We were pretty much dead in the water. And I remember saying to Alex Cusack, I said, listen, why don't we just play a few shots? I'd rather lose trying to win the game, get bowled out for 160 in like 26 overs or 27 overs, then, tap it around for the next 20 overs and lose by 50 runs and basically bore the crowd for an hour and a half and bore the people watching on TV, bore the people commentating on the game. And, Cusey he's more laid back than me. So he just says, yeah, go on, let's go for it. And we just took our chances, man. I slogged a couple into the standoff, Swan, Cusey, hit a couple here and there. And all of a sudden, I think after 30 overs something, we took the power play, which was unheard of in around that time in international cricket, because a lot of teams left the 5 over batting power play to probably the last 10 overs, take it at over 40 and try and gain some momentum going into the last 5. And, I remember saying to Cusey, listen, why don't you just take it now, just for a bit of crack? I think we took it after the 30th over or something. And then, I think we scored something like 65 in those 5 overs. And, we had huge momentum then going into the last 15. I think we needed maybe 105 off 15 overs or something like that. And I had a feeling then that if myself or Cusey were there towards the end, we'd win the game. And I remember vividly saying to myself, we need only 7 and over. This game is here for ours now. And there was a big mental shift then. And I suppose that brings a different type of pressure, because the first 7 or 8 overs of my innings, from over 22 to whatever it was, 29 or 30, there was no pressure on me or Cusey. But obviously once we got closer to the England target and, the crowd, more and more people started coming into the ground the longer the game went on. So obviously people then started thinking, actually, Ireland have a chance of winning. And then that brings its own added pressure and its own mental pressure and how to deal with that. I mean, there was a big shift in my innings, both mentally and how I played, probably for my last 30 or 40 runs.
So you talked about that. Yeah, the mental shift. I'm just wondering. It's one of those magic days in an athlete's career where everything just goes well for you and everything works. So what was it like a sort of a trance-like state where everything was just working for you?
You could probably say in the zone kind of thing. I don't know. I'm not that deep a thinker of much things in general. So I don't know if I believe in the zone and that type of thing. I trained very well in the lead up to the tournament. I was playing some good cricket in the 18 months, 24 months before the tournament. And generally, I'm a fairly confident person anyway. And I had thought about doing something in that World Cup. And now I could never imagine doing what I did. But yeah, no, it just seemed to work on the day. Everything I went to hit came somewhere close to the middle of the bat. Andrew Strauss dropped me on whatever it was, 91 or something. Edges went past fielders, Cusey's edges went past fielders, John Boy's edges went past fielders. Yeah, so it was just one of those things, everything clicked for us as a team and me personally on that day. And thankfully it did. And, we got over the line.
The iconic image of you celebrating with like the arms out wide is just etched into my brain, because I haven't told anyone this, but for my last year of school, I had this binder, right, that had all my books, my school books, and it had 4 things inside. It had my school timetable, it had a photo of Kim Kardashian, it had Everton celebrating the semi-final penalty shootout win against United, I think, in the cup, might have been the season before, and I had that photo of you with your pink, like the pink hair, like kind of coming out from the side of the hat. Like the celebrations just looked wild. There's like a photo of you with, I think Niall's got his arm around you with a pair of shoes in his left hand. I don't know why. You've got the stump in the other hand. Like, just go through some of the celebrations, because that would have been just wild. And it was only halfway through the tournament as well, so I'm guessing it was semi-reserved, but not really, because it's England, and I suppose, just even looking at it from that point of view, it would have been crazy. What was it like?
Oh, first of all, I can't believe I made it into your school folder. That's pretty cool. That's going to go on my Twitter bio.
So Daniel Beswick has, and the only man to commentate 2 ODIs in one day, and Kevin O'Brien will be in Daniel Beswick's school folder.
I've got to try and find it, because it was England as well. It's like, the 1 degree of separation Australia and Ireland have with England. It's kind of this rare sort of bond, like an enemy of an enemy is my friend almost.
But no, getting back to your question, the celebrations were, first of all, I don't know why Niall had the pair of Adidas runners in his hand. He must have been looking for an endorsement deal or something. But it was a strange one, because we got back to it was a day-night game, obviously, so we got back to the hotel. We probably had a beer or 2 in the change room afterwards, and I think we got back to the hotel maybe, let's say, 1 o'clock at night, 12:30, 1 o'clock, and the hotel residence bar had closed. So we were like, what's going on here? And so luckily the hotel manager put in a big esky full of beers, and basically opened up this kind of room beside the reception, and like basically we just had I don't know if it was free. I don't think the players paid anything, but it was probably on Cricket Ireland's tab. So it was just a free for all. We were, a few of the wives were there and girlfriends and stuff, and my folks came down and stuff like that. So yeah, it was just an epic. I can't remember what time I finished that. Obviously it was 10 years ago anyway, but even if it happened last week, I wouldn't know what time I went to bed. And then it was fairly reserved. I remember the next day waking up and heading over to the Porty's room, and obviously being captain, he had like a proper suite with like a living room and stuff, and a couple of couches, and there was just people, bodies lying across the couches, and he was out in the balcony. He just popped open a bottle of whiskey or something. This was like 9 o'clock in the morning. I don't think he'd gone to bed, so he was just sipping away there. I just sat with him there for a while.
Golden Duck, that's not bad. Jeez, that's
yeah, it was all right. Well, the thing is, we had to play India in like 48 hours. So I think it was like 3 days later or something, we played India. The media request after the England game was just absolutely just crazy. I think Barry Chambers, who you guys might know, he was our media manager at the time. He literally had to just set up a temporary office in the hotel, and just, as you know, we just got questions left, right, and center for interviews with everyone, and it was just crazy. It was a crazy 36 hours, and I actually got to a stage where Simo had to put a media ban on it after about 36 hours. He said, "Listen, there's no more interviews, because we're playing India in 36 hours, so we actually need to prepare for that." So Simo kind of put a block on any more questions about the England game after a long time.
That's incredible. The images that I just have of that is outstanding. Like the Irish equivalent of Sunrise trying to get someone in India to like cross over to them, and they're all there like in the wee hours of the morning celebrating. That's just phenomenal. But you do mention Phil Simmons there and the role that he had in Ireland cricket for a long time. How vital was he in pushing the game forward in Ireland? Because he was there in that period, and I'm sure he left a lasting legacy as well.
Yeah, I mean, Simo was obviously our coach for 8 years, so over an 8-year span, we were probably the best associate team around. We were the most consistent, and arguably we were probably, I think at one stage we got into the top. We were ranked up in the top 8 in 50 over cricket, or 2020, maybe both. So certainly the impact he had on us as players. Certainly the guys who were based in Ireland, who he dealt majority of the time with, during the winters in the indoor hall, and all that type of stuff. So Yeah, I can't speak any higher than Simo. He had a great impact on my career. He was technically, he was a fantastic coach. His mental knowledge of the game, assessing the opposition, their weaknesses and their strengths, and how to counter them was second to none. So he was a great believer in playing your own natural game, and for someone like me who likes to play aggressive cricket and likes to take the bowlers on when I'm batting, obviously Simo coming from Trinidad and the West Indies, that's the way he played the game, and that's the way he wanted his team to play. And obviously myself and Sterlo being two very aggressive players, he liked the way we played cricket and kind of gave us that freedom to fail, knowing the fact that we'll come good every now and again. Myself and Sterlo wouldn't have been the most consistent in the team. We had Joycey and Nyler and Porty for that. But, Simo knew the fact that if myself and Sterlo bat for, an hour in a 50-over game, we're going to score quickly and take the game to the opposition.
To come back to the World Cup and then playing again in 2015, we know about that, and eventually you guys moving to full membership, and we'll talk about Test cricket in a moment, but everything the ICC giveth with full membership, they taketh with the World Cup and the shrinking of teams at the tournament. We only saw 10 teams, of course, in 2019. How disappointing was it to hear of that news? And what do you think, look at the issues that it has caused, and watching that snooze fest that was the 2019 World Cup? How important is the World Cup to Ireland and other emerging nations in the development of the sport? Because, as you said, in 2007 and 2011, it really helped put the sport on the map for you guys. Not only, for you guys nationally, but just to show Irish cricket to the world.
Yeah, it is massive. And it was disappointing, when the ICC did make that decision in, I think it was 2017 or something, to say that the World Cup would be 10 teams. And ultimately, on the flip side, we still had a chance to qualify. We went to Zimbabwe, the qualifiers in 2018, and we didn't play good enough cricket to qualify, unfortunately. But yeah, I still think it is a massive opportunity for not just Ireland, but, other teams, other countries around the world to have a chance to, express themselves as a team, as individuals, on the world stage at a World Cup, And obviously we have the T20 World Cup is now 16 teams, although the first 8, the lower ranked 8 teams have to play in this preliminary 2 groupings, which top 2 from each. If you call that a World Cup, I don't know. The World Cup the T20 World Cup only really starts when the big boys come in, and that's unfortunate. If you look at football, they're looking at expanding their World Cup. Hockey are looking at expanding more teams, and I just don't know why the ICC are contracting their tournaments, especially the major tournaments. The 50-over World Cup, when I was growing up, that's all I watched. There obviously was no T20 when I was growing up, and I remember going to the 99 World Cup game in Clontarf between West Indies and Bangladesh as a 14 or 15-year-old kid. Went to watch it. It was unbelievable, to see 50 over cricket up close and personal, and see Brian Lara was playing, Courtney Walsh was playing, some other greats of the game. So it's really important for the smaller nations to experience those 50 over tournaments. And I know we have T20, and that's great, don't get me wrong, but if you're a smaller nation going to a T20 World Cup, you play 3 games, you don't win them, you're home after a week. It's not the same feeling as going to the Caribbean and qualifying from your initial group and staying on for an extra 4 weeks, or going to India in 2011 and playing 6 or 7 group games. So you're there for a prolonged period, as it was in 2015 in New Zealand and Australia. So it's really important that teams get to experience World Cups, and not just the token, here's 3 games at the T20 World Cup. If you don't qualify from the initial group, you go home after a week. It's something that ICC need to look at and try and rectify that, because I didn't watch any of the 2019 World Cup just because I didn't have any time with 2 kids at home. You just didn't have time to sit down and watch games for 6 or 7 hours. So to hear you say that it was a bit of a snore fest, that's not what World Cup cricket should be about. There should be upsets, there should be good games, and some of the best games in the previous World Cup editions were associates v associates, or the lower ranked test nation against an associate, and that's what the general public around the world want to see. They want to see the likes of Ireland or Scotland play Afghanistan, that unbelievable game, and I think it was in Dunedin in 2015 when Afghanistan won by a wicket. Shapur hit the winning runs off his legs, clipped it for 4. They're the games people want to see. They don't want to see England get 350 and India get 340, 320. And they want to see tight games, 180. The opposition get it for 9, or an upset here or there. That's just my own opinion.
Yeah, well, actually, funny you should say that. You know, one of the other close games was the Irish game against the UAE, where you know you hit a very brisk 50 to get your team over the line, and you know, just thinking back to that 2015 World Cup where, you know, Ireland just missed out on run rate, lost out to Pakistan in the last group game, even though Porterfield got a century. It was a case of very close, but just still couldn't quite get over the line. Was that really frustrating, having built so much momentum over the last kind of 10 years?
Yeah, massively. You know, I think that World Cup was a pretty special one for us as well. You know, we obviously started out, we beat West Indies in Nelson fairly convincingly. And as you said, we had the close victory against the UAE in Brisbane, which was one of the best World Cup games that I've played in. But I think a lot of neutrals have said it was just a really good game of cricket as well. You know, two decent sides, very well evenly matched at the time, you know, playing pretty exciting game of cricket where we were, you know, almost dead and buried. And Gary Wilson and Andrew Balbirnie had a good partnership to get us back in the game. And George Dockwell finished it off in the last over. So, yeah, that World Cup also was disappointing, like frustrating, I'd say, from us. You know, we won 3 games. We beat Zimbabwe as well. So, I think we were sitting top of the table at one stage, 3 wins from 3.
Another tense game, that one too, yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, well, I helped with my useless bowling towards the end.
Bloke's taking 100 ODI wickets and he's just calling himself useless.
Yeah, exactly. This is no place for false modesty.
No, but yeah, no, we were top of the table, I think, on run rate, and with 3 games to go, and we were due to play South Africa, India, and Pakistan, so we needed to win one of those games, which on paper seems fairly easy, you know. But obviously, it came down to the Pakistan game, and as you said, Purdy got 100, played unbelievably well in Adelaide. And we just didn't get enough runs, which is frustrating because we had a really good team, we had a very experienced side. Probably anything we lacked. Probably a bit of pace in our bowling attack to suit the Australian wickets at the time.
The Kevin O'Brien right arm over didn't quite do it?
No, I was bowling in the 60-mile-an-hour zones then. I just wasn't really a death bowler at that stage of my career, unfortunately.
You've been rolling the arm over recently again, though, haven't you?
Reluctantly. Yeah, it's... I like bowling, but I don't like the pain it gives my body. And, you know, the next day you wake up and you can barely walk and you can't get out of bed. And that's just me being a gentle medium pace bowler. Let's be all honest about it in world cricket terms. I can't even think how the quick bowlers, you know, after a day in the dirt in a test match, having bowled 25 overs, you know, I don't know how they get up the next day. They must be in serious pain.
So we aren't going to see you bowling some little off spinners or some Chris Harrises out the back of the hand?
Maybe in league cricket over here, maybe might just bowl a few off spinners. I've tried some leg spinners in the league games over here, but they've gone filthy and I've got absolute pumped.
They do say gets wickets though. You never know. Just
yeah, I did get a wicket.
Yeah.
I got a wicket with it.
Good old Rowan Mustafa, didn't you? He's a handy bat.
Yeah, he's a good player, Rowan.
Yet another one of you guys that have been in Nepal.
Yeah, he was the 3rd captain of our team in Kathmandu Kings. First game was Sompal. He got injured, out for the tournament. I took over. We got hammered by 10 wickets. And then Rohan came in and captained the last 7 games. It's the only time I've had 3 captains in a tournament.
Was that a hostile takeover? Or did you pass it over willingly? Or did he just come and take it from you? It sounds like there's a little bit of a grey area between you part.
A bit 50-50, I'd say. That's probably best left for off air, I'd say.
So did he just turn his hat backward, walk up to you and go, right, I'm doing it now, and I can imagine him just running off and doing it because he just is that kind of old lead guys. I'll do it, but
and it was to be honest, it was the coach Binod came up to me and said, "Listen, Rohan, obviously he's played with a lot of the guys before and in the Pokhara League, and I'm pretty laid back, so I just said to Binod, I said, listen, mate, just say whatever you want. If you want to be a skipper, that's happy days, no dramas." So I just continued about playing.
While we're here, it's probably worth bringing up just how cricket mad that place is. The crowds at the TU ground are incredible, to say the least. And in associate circles, you know, they're unrivaled in terms of their support. What was it like playing in front of that audience?
Yeah, it was absolutely unbelievable. It's the main reason why I signed up to play the tournament. Just I'd heard a lot of stories from Barry Chambers, who was a Cricket Ireland media manager. He was over in Kathmandu years ago doing some photography for Nepal v USA. And he said there was 20,000 odd at the match. And so since then, it's just always appealed to me to go over and play. And obviously, being so close to India, they're just cricket mad. So, once Amir got onto me in 2018 to come over and play, I jumped at the opportunity just to go over and experience another cricket mad country. And we weren't massive crowds like 20,000, but I think at the final, there was something like 15,000 at the final. Probably the games that I played in, there was maybe between 8 and 10, 8 and 12. But it's just, as you know yourself, the ground's so small and the atmosphere is just second to none. They just absolutely love cricket. And they've been starved of cricket, unfortunately, but hopefully now with Nepal getting ODI status in the last couple of years, being a very good team, there might be talk of, teams going over to play there in some series very soon.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. What's going to happen there with them not having a cricket association back when these T20 leagues were playing, and now there being the cricket association in Nepal being back. It's going to be intriguing to see how that ecosystem will work when you've had these private leagues basically being de facto pathway events really for the national team, and to see how they leverage that passion, because you've got a country of almost 30 million people and when cricket's on they go cricket mad. It's just a matter of, I think it was Paris, wasn't it, saying that they're all up and cheering, but if they lose the next day, it's like the game doesn't exist, and it's about maintaining that passion in everybody all the time to carry it through. But when people ask, if you're interviewing someone who knows a bit about associate cricket, it's like, well, who's going to be the next big thing, or who's going to be the next full member? It's like, well, besides Nepal, there are all these other options, because how many other countries in the world have that kind of support behind the country? It's amazing. So we're talking about sort of packed out crowds there in Nepal. I remember watching the first first men's test match, Ireland against Pakistan. I think it's more of a sort of a retrospective as you look back after the time it had taken to get there, and then having the actual first day washed out. Does that almost sum up the quest getting there? But historic for you, second innings 100, and giving them a tricky chase in the fourth innings. You just reflect on what playing Test cricket felt like after all those years and all those dreams.
Well, certainly with the first day getting washed out, that certainly probably typifies Irish cricket. Anytime we generally have a big game here in Dublin or Belfast, generally the rain interrupts it and reduced it to a 20-over slogathon or something like that. So it was quite funny that we waited so long, and then the first day is completely washed out. But yeah, as you mentioned, to be honest with me, for me, when obviously as a kid growing up, myself and Niall playing cricket in the garden and stuff, like we always played Test cricket. Very rarely would we play an ODI, for example. It was always a 2 innings Test match. He was generally Australia, he used to bat as Steve Waugh, and I was usually England. I was usually Darren Gough. So we grew up watching Test cricket on BBC, and it's funny that obviously my career kind of went along, and I prioritised white ball cricket, and as much as I enjoy playing like first class cricket and red ball stuff, it doesn't appeal to me as much as white ball cricket and limited over stuff. So for me, when the announcement was made in 2017 that we were the next one of the next Test nations, it was obviously a huge milestone for Cricket Ireland. But for me as a player, I didn't know when we would play Test cricket. I thought that how many tests would we have in the next 4 or 5 years as I was coming to the end of my career. So it wasn't really on my radar that I was going to be a Test cricketer until obviously Pakistan said they'll come over and play us before they went over to England. So yeah, once we kind of knew, and once I knew when we'd play, I suppose then I started thinking about it a bit more. And, I suppose you start getting a little bit nervous then of, am I good enough to play Test cricket? Obviously had 10 or 12 years of playing white ball cricket thrown in with a few first class games here and there for Ireland, and obviously in the interprovincial structure here. But you kind of start doubting yourself and thinking, geez, Test cricket, am I good enough to be able to compete for 5 days against the best, some of the best players in the world? Is my technique good enough? Just all the little doubts that, probably every cricketer has at some stage in their career start to come to fruition. So, so it was interesting leading into that Test match. There was certainly nerves around the camp in the days leading up to the match at training and stuff like that. And I think in a funny way, the first day getting washed out potentially could have helped us a little bit as individuals and as players, just to kind of get over that fear and the nervousness that potentially was around the group.
It's hard enough playing Test cricket at any level, but to play against a seeming attack that Pakistan had on that deck. I can just think of, Mohammad Abbas just swinging it around corners, making it really difficult for everyone involved. It was a baptism of fire, and only being able to draw on, just a few first class games, whether that be, I-Cup matches or, other matches like that. I suppose it did help having the game abbreviated to 4 days, but singing Ireland's call and all of that, how special was that doing all of this in front of your home fans as well?
It was very emotional. Andrew White, who is the chairman of selectors, obviously a lot of us have played with him for a long time, myself included. So he gave out the test caps in the huddle beforehand, and we did it over beside the kind of corporate tent where a lot of our families were and partners. So that was pretty cool, and it was, that was pretty emotional for all of us. There was certainly a tear in all of our eyes as Whitey was, doling out the caps and saying his few little words to each player and that type of thing. And that's something that obviously you looked forward to hugely, in the week leading into the game. And as you said, singing Ireland's call, and there was a decent crowd in for the second day. It was actually a pretty nice day weather-wise. So singing Ireland's call pretty much any international for me is pretty cool and pretty emotional. It's not every day, and you don't do it forever that you play for your country. So you've got to try and kind of cherish every time you pull on the jersey, really, and just to give your best shot and try and influence the game somehow.
It's amazing someone who's played for Ireland over 300 times say that, to being so significant in the course of Irish cricketing history, that moment of your first test match, and now looking at it in 2021, and we know what the situation has been like, but I think we can all probably agree that there hasn't been enough test matches that Ireland have been able to play with the uncertainty of scheduling, not being in the World Test Championship and other parts of international cricket that could do with some addressing. From a player's point of view, how frustrating is it to only have, say, one test here or there instead of a proper 3-test series in a far-flung corner of the earth?
Yeah, it is frustrating. We've played 3 tests since we got test status in 2017. Since we made our debut 2018, we've only played 3 games. And obviously last year was a complete washout with COVID, so you can kind of take 1 year off. But yeah, it would be lovely to be able to look forward to saying, like even a 2-test series, in August or September or somewhere overseas during the winter time, that we can go over and play a couple of tests, play a few ODIs and a few T20s, make it a proper tour. It is frustrating, but I suppose on the other side we've got to focus currently, as a team and I imagine as an organization, we've got to focus on white ball cricket for the next 3 seasons, with 2 T20 World Cups and a 50 over World Cup coming up. So for us, well, for me, that's obviously more important at the moment is qualifying for those 3 tournaments. Obviously we've qualified for the October version in India now this year. So, we've got that to look forward to and got that to prep for. And then the following season is in Australia. So that will be a great World Cup to qualify for. Having played there in 2015, the wickets are good to play on. We get good support. There's, plenty of Irish people in Australia and New Zealand and who came to our games in 2015. So it'd be great to get back over there for the T20 next year.
While it's in my head, I'm interested to know, with the T20 World Cup postponed last year that was to be held in Australia, you guys had already qualified, obviously, but that tournament moving from Australia to India, the 2 questions that come to mind are, one, what was that pivot like for you guys as a playing group, knowing that you've got to prepare for a different tournament in a different country? And 2, how much do you want the M. Chinnaswamy Stadium to be in your list of fixtures come when that tournament comes around?
Yeah, so the answer to the first part, yeah, I mean, I think once COVID kind of hit, even in March, April, I knew that the chance of playing in that World Cup was absolutely zero. Obviously Australia had taken such a hard line on COVID in terms of, how many people they were letting in and that type of thing, which obviously, as we sit here now, it probably was the correct thing to do in terms of your numbers are being so low, and we're still in bloody level 5 lockdown here in Ireland. So it wasn't that hard, I should say. Sorry, it wasn't that hard to forget about the Australian World Cup and then just kind of refocus for the India one this year. But I mean, I suppose it throws up a couple of kind of logistical things in terms of for our team. Our team might have been different, a few different selections potentially, from a tournament that was in Australia as opposed to a tournament that's going to be in India now in terms of squad makeup and stuff. So I suppose that's something the selectors have obviously considered over the last few months and that type of thing. But in terms of the Chinnaswamy, yeah, it'd be unbelievable to go back there and have 3 group games there beforehand, or to play a few games there would be pretty cool. Certainly bring back some memories. But any ground in India, they're all pretty good. Like, let's be honest, I'd love to play in the Wankhede. That'd be great. If there was good crowd there, I'm sure that'd be good atmosphere. obviously we've got good memories of Kolkata beating Holland there in 2011 as well. So yeah, listen, any ground, first of all, you've got to stay fit and be on the plane over to the World Cup. That's the first thing. And, obviously if we can qualify from the initial group of 4, to get into the World Cup proper, in inverted commas, would be great as well.
That's the end of part 1 of our 2-part special with Kevin O'Brien here at the Emerging Cricket Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to us if you haven't done so already, so you can tune in as soon as the show drops every week. Pass the pod around, and make sure to give us a 5-star review. If you want to support us financially, go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/Emerging Cricket, where you can support us from as little as $2 a month. You'll get access to extended cuts of a number of our shows, and you'll have a say on the show's direction. For now, on behalf of Nick Skinner, Tim Cutler, and myself, Daniel Beswick, see you next week.